Hello, my name's Allie, and I just inherited $26 million. Sounds like a dream, right? But when my family came after me demanding everything, I realized the inheritance wasn't the only thing they'd been hiding. Secrets, lies, and a crime that could destroy us all. And it all started with a simple demand. You won't believe what they tried to hide from me. I was betrayed by the very people I trusted most. What happens next will shock you. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. The day started like any other. I was at home in my small New York City apartment, sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee that was far too weak to get me through the day. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting muted streaks of light across the room. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I lived alone, a kind of quiet life that was comfortable in its routine but never thrilling. I was a kindergarten teacher, barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. At 31, I had gotten used to a life of modest means, and to be honest, it suited me just fine. I didn't need fancy things or an extravagant lifestyle. I had my job, my small circle of close friends, and a peaceful, if somewhat uneventful, existence. But that morning, everything changed. The phone rang just as I was about to pour more coffee into my mug. I glanced at the screen, and my heart skipped when I saw the name. Matthew Goldstein, my grandparents' lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in a while. My stomach did a flip. I hadn't seen or heard from my grandparents in months, and the thought of them crossed my mind less often than I'd like to admit. Still, their passing was something I hadn't quite been able to accept. They'd been in a car accident 6 months ago, and I never imagined that, despite the time that had passed, I would ever hear from their lawyer again. Hello? I answered, trying to sound normal, though a wave of anxiety settled in my chest. Hello, Allie. This is Matthew Goldstein. I'm calling regarding your grandparents' estate. I'm afraid there's been an unexpected development. I need you to come in as soon as possible. His words were a blur, but what struck me most was the sudden shift in tone. He wasn't the one to call me with bad news. That was never his role. He was always the calm, collected figure, relaying information in a business-like manner. But this time, there was something different, something urgent, something that immediately made me feel like I was about to hear something I wasn't prepared for. Is everything okay? I managed to ask, though my voice felt shaky. I'm afraid not. I suggest you come to the office, and we'll discuss the details. I agreed, my mind swirling. What could it be? My grandparents had lived full, long lives, and the last time I checked, everything had been settled. There were no loose ends, no surprises. But now, I had to face the unknown, and I didn't like it. When I arrived at his office later that morning, it felt like the walls were closing in around me. The Victorian building in the heart of the city had an old charm, but today it seemed oppressive. I was shown into his office, where he stood behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Please sit down, Allie, Matthew said, motioning to the chair across from him. I sat, but not without hesitation, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked at me for a moment before speaking again. Allie, I'm afraid your grandparents' death was just the beginning of an unexpected turn of events. You are their sole heir. The entire $26 million estate is yours. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind raced back to the countless memories I'd had with them. The love, the warmth, the way they always made me feel special. But this felt wrong, like something was off. Wait, what? I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean I'm the heir? Matthew nodded slowly, his face devoid of emotion. I know this must come as a shock, but it's true. You are the only beneficiary of their estate. The will was very clear. Your name is the only one listed. I sat there, frozen. My grandparents were kind people, but they'd never mention anything about leaving me such an enormous amount of money. They had always been modest, living their lives quietly in a small house in the suburbs. They had no lavish lifestyle, no grand fortune. What could they have been hiding? And why had they kept it from me? Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. I wasn't even aware that they had this much wealth. I can assure you, Allie, everything is legal and above board. You are the sole heir, and all documents are in order. The weight of the words crushed me. I didn't know how to feel. There was a strange sense of guilt bubbling up inside me. I hadn't been close to my grandparents in recent years, not in the way I once was. But this felt like a betrayal of sorts. I had no idea what to do with this information, or how to even process it. Well, Matthew continued, his voice still calm, I understand that this is a lot to take in, but I need to know how you would like to proceed. The inheritance is substantial, and I'm here to guide you through the process. I nodded, still in a daze. I couldn't think straight. A part of me wanted to run out of the office, away from the responsibility, the confusion, but I couldn't. I couldn't just walk away from this. My grandparents had entrusted me with their legacy, and I had to respect that. As I left his office, a heavy weight hung on my shoulders. The world seemed to have tilted on its axis, and everything felt uncertain. The life I had known was slipping away, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the changes that were coming. But one thing was clear, I was now at a crossroads, and I had no idea where this new path would lead. The tension in the lawyer's office was palpable. As soon as I sat down, the air felt thick with the weight of the situation. The small, cozy room, normally a place I associated with calm and professionalism, now felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in on me. I could feel the heat of my family's gaze, each pair of eyes locked on me, waiting for a decision that would change everything. My heart raced as I looked around at the faces I had known my whole life. My father, Richard, stood rigid, his arms crossed over his chest. His expression was a mix of frustration and something darker anger, perhaps. He didn't like that this was happening. My mother, Diane, sat with a forced calmness, her eyes not quite meeting mine. She wore that look, the one that made it clear she was already calculating her next move. Jason, my younger brother, was slouched in his chair, completely disengaged, his eyes glued to his phone. And then there was Aunt Pam, trying her hardest to seem devastated, though her feigned sorrow was too theatrical to be genuine. They were all waiting for me to do something. To make the right move, the move they thought they deserved. I could feel their expectations pulling at me, demanding something I wasn't sure I was ready to give. The inheritance, my grandparents' estate. They weren't just asking me for money, they were asking me to uphold a family dynamic that had always been one-sided. My entire life I had been the one who gave, the one who took the back seat. Now, for the first time, I had something they wanted and they were pushing me to give it up. Are you going to keep it all to yourself, Allie? Richard's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence in the room. His tone wasn't just demanding, it was accusatory. We've all sacrificed for you, for this family, and now you're going to take everything? What kind of person does that make you? His words hit me like a slap in the face. They cut deeper than I expected. I wasn't prepared for this level of aggression. I'd always known that my father believed in hierarchy, that he had certain expectations of me, but hearing him speak so directly, so coldly about what I owed him, it made my skin crawl. You're asking me to share it, I said, trying to steady my shaking voice. But you're not offering me anything in return, Dad. You never have. My words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before Diane spoke up, her voice soft, almost gentle. Allie, sweetheart, she said, the sweetness of her tone, almost suffocating. We're just asking you to be generous. This isn't just about you. Think about what this money could do for all of us. For your father's business, for your brother's future, for the family legacy. I could tell she was trying to manipulate me, to play on my guilt. It wasn't the first time. Every time my parents wanted something from me, they tried to make me feel like I owed them, like I had no choice but to give in. Jason, still absorbed in his phone, looked up only briefly, his eyes darting to me before quickly returning to his screen. I mean, it's whatever, he muttered, his indifference clear. I don't care, really. His lack of interest in the inheritance made me feel even more isolated. It was like he couldn't care less about the wealth, but in a way, it was almost worse than if he had been all over it. He didn't even have the decency to pretend. Aunt Pam, ever the dramatist, sniffed loudly and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, clearly wanting to be noticed. This is a tragedy, Allie. You don't understand what this means for the rest of us. Your grandparents worked so hard, and now, well, it's all up to you. We've all done our part, haven't we? She looked around at the family as if waiting for them to agree, but none of them responded. Everyone knew Pam's tears were a performance. It was all for show. Matthew Goldstein, the lawyer, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat. As I've already mentioned, he said, speaking in his calm, professional manner, the will is quite clear. Allie is the sole heir. There are no other beneficiaries. It's her decision how she chooses to proceed. The room fell silent for a moment, and the tension thickened. The lawyer's words should have been comforting, but instead, they made everything feel more real and more impossible. Richard's expression darkened. "You're not listening," he snapped. "We're not asking, Allie. We're telling you. You have an obligation to your family. Don't let the money change you. Don't forget who you are. You wouldn't have even been able to go to college without us. Don't act like this is all yours." I could feel my stomach tighten. I had spent so many years trying to earn my father's approval, but it was never enough. Not for him. Not for Diane. They had always taken from me, always expected more. And now, when I finally had something to hold on to, something of my own, they wanted it. I felt the weight of their stares pressing down on me. My family wasn't just asking for money. They were asking me to keep playing the role I had always played. The role of the obedient daughter, the one who gave, the one who sacrificed. They wanted me to give up everything I had just inherited to give it all to them. But the more I listened, the angrier I became. The more their demands piled up, the clearer it became that they had never really seen me. Not as a person with dreams or desires, but as a tool they could use to get what they wanted. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I had to stand my ground. But what would that mean for me? What would it mean for my relationship with them? Could I really walk away from everything they were demanding without losing them completely? Before I could answer, Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold and final. "You'll see that, Allie. You'll see that soon enough." The tension in the room was unbearable, but I knew I had to make a choice. The weight of my family's expectations was crushing me, and I could already feel the cracks forming between us. The question was, could I hold on to my inheritance without losing everything else? I hadn't thought it would feel this heavy. The day after the meeting with the lawyer, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The family pressure was relentless, and it seemed like everyone had an opinion on what I should do with my inheritance. But what hit me the hardest wasn't just the money. It was the realization that for the first time in my life, I had control over something that truly mattered. I had a choice. The decision to move into my grandparents' house had been spontaneous at first, driven by an impulse to get away from my parents' manipulative grasp. But as I packed up my modest apartment, the weight of the decision began to settle in. I was leaving behind the familiar, my life in New York, everything that was safe but suffocating, for the unknown. The apartment was small but cozy. I had lived there for years, trying to make ends meet as a kindergarten teacher. It wasn't much, but it was mine until the inheritance, until my family's expectations, until they made it clear that nothing in my life could ever just be mine. Packing felt like shedding skin. I caught myself staring at the old, faded pictures on the wall, memories of a life that felt more like a series of obligations than anything else. My parents had always made me feel like I owed them something. There was never enough appreciation, never enough acknowledgement of what I had done on my own. Always a reminder that I should be grateful for what they'd provided. But now, they wanted more. And they weren't shy about it. The more I packed, the more I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about my identity, about proving to myself that I wasn't just a tool for my family's needs. My parents had spent years making me feel small, making me feel like I didn't matter unless I did things their way. But now, with this inheritance, I had something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away by their demands. And as I stood there, in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by boxes, I made a decision. I would take control. I would move into my grandparents' house. It wasn't just about escape. It was about taking back my life. The next morning, I arrived at my grandparents' house, the place that had always been a sanctuary for me. It was a modest home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, filled with memories that were both comforting and painful. It was here that I had learned to dream, to believe in my own worth, even if my parents hadn't. My grandparents had always encouraged me to follow my heart, to take the path that was right for me, even if it wasn't the easiest. As I walked through the front door, I could almost hear their voices, their laughter echoing through the walls. It was a bittersweet feeling. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. There were no expectations weighing down on me here, no one telling me what to do, how to think, or how to behave. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and settling in, surrounded by the familiar smell of my grandmother's cooking and the quiet comfort of their old furniture. It was a place that felt like home, but at the same time, it was a constant reminder of the life I had left behind. My parents, their anger, their manipulation, it was all still out there, waiting for me to come back and play my part in their game. As I unpacked the last of my things, I noticed an old leather-bound journal on the bookshelf. It was my grandmother's. She had always been a quiet, private person, and I had never seen this journal before. Curious, I sat down on the couch and opened it up. The pages were filled with stories of my grandparents' life, their struggles, their dreams. But as I flipped through, one passage caught my eye. It was about my father. My grandmother had written about her frustration with him, the way he had always been focused on money and power. She spoke of how he had been involved in shady business deals, how his greed had caused tension in the family. I had always known my father was a complicated man, but this was something different. This was deeper. My grandmother had been quietly resisting him for years, keeping secrets, protecting the family's legacy. The more I read, the more I realized that the inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about something darker. My father's greed, his betrayal of the family, was tied to everything I was now facing. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a fight for control over my inheritance, over my future, and over the truth. As I sat there, thinking about what I had just discovered, I felt a surge of determination. I wasn't just standing up to my parents, I was standing up to the lies, to the manipulation, to everything they had tried to impose on me for years. But as the evening wore on, the weight of the situation became even clearer. The truth was more dangerous than I had realized. And it wasn't just about protecting my inheritance anymore. It was about protecting myself, my future. The phone rang late that night, startling me. I answered, my heart pounding. Stay away from the money, a voice whispered, cold and ominous. I froze the words, sending a chill down my spine. The voice was unfamiliar. An anonymous warning. My grip tightened on the phone. Someone knew. Someone knew more than they should, and I wasn't sure if I could trust anyone anymore. It had been a few days since my parents' last visit, and I could still feel the weight of their words hanging in the air. The pressure to give in, to hand over the inheritance, was unbearable. I was trying to settle into my grandparents' house, but every corner seemed to remind me of the fight that was coming. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. It was a different kind of silence here, one that was not oppressive, but one that demanded reflection. I sat by the fireplace, the glow of the fire casting long shadows on the walls. I had spent the day organizing the house, putting my things in place, trying to make it feel like home. But as I sat there, I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. My thoughts kept circling back to that conversation. My father's anger, my mother's manipulations, they were still with me, pressing down on my mind, making me second-guess everything I had decided. As the fire crackled, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I reached for it, expecting a message from one of my friends. But no, it was another anonymous message. The screen displayed only the words, "The truth will cost you more than you think." A chill ran down my spine. My heart skipped a beat. How did they know? Was this message a warning? Or was it something more sinister? I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words echoing in my mind. Was this truly worth it? Was uncovering my family's secrets worth the damage it would cause? I put the phone down, trying to calm my nerves. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could back out now. I had already crossed the line. There was no going back. The family was pushing me into a corner, trying to control me, trying to make me believe that I owed them everything. But what did I owe them? Really? Nothing. They had never given me the love or support I had needed growing up. All I had ever wanted was to be seen, to be heard. And now, with this inheritance, I had a chance to do that for myself. The slow pace of my thoughts was interrupted by a loud knock at the door. My heart jumped. I knew exactly who it was before I even stood up. My parents, they had come back. I opened the door, and there they were, standing on the threshold, their faces set in hard lines. Richard, my father, was the first to speak. His voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the anger beneath it. "It's time to come back, Allie," he said, his eyes narrowing. "The family's falling apart, and you're the only one who can fix it." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not going back," I said firmly, standing my ground. "This is where I belong." Richard's eyes flashed with fury. "You don't understand, do you? You think you can just take this money and run away? This inheritance, this family, it's all connected. You have a responsibility, Allie. I shook my head, the anger bubbling up inside me. No, I'm not responsible for you or your mistakes. His face darkened, and he stepped closer, towering over me. You think you're the only one who matters? You think you can just walk away from everything? Behind him, Diane stood silently, her eyes filled with disappointment, as if I had failed her somehow. She took a step forward, her voice soft but filled with pressure. Allie, you've always been so selfish. The family needs you. We gave you everything. Now, it's time for you to give back. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them how much they had taken from me, how much they had made me feel small, but I didn't. Instead, I simply said, I'm not backing down. This is my decision. Richard sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You've always been a disappointment. But this is going to destroy us all. I stood there, my legs shaking, but I didn't let them see how much his words hurt. I had spent my whole life trying to get their approval, but not anymore. They weren't going to control me. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. This will destroy everything. But it won't be because of me. It'll be because of you. With that, I slammed the door in their faces, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I knew I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. The silence in the house felt even heavier now. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew I had done the right thing. Or at least, I hoped I had. I spent the rest of the evening pacing the house, trying to figure out what to do next. My mind was a jumble of emotions, anger, fear, confusion, but beneath it all, there was something else. A flicker of resolve. I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. Later that night, I sat down in the study, surrounded by the documents I had discovered earlier. The truth was buried in those papers, but I had no idea how deep it went. I had found a set of legal documents hidden among my grandparents' things, contracts, and letters that hinted at something darker beneath the surface of our family's business dealings. But there was one thing that stood out more than anything else. Richard had been hiding something illegal. I couldn't yet put all the pieces together, but I knew enough to realize that this wasn't just a matter of inheritance. It was about saving the family name or destroying it. As I sat there digesting what I had found, I heard a faint ping from my phone. Another message. This one was even more cryptic than the last. Stop digging, Allie, or you'll regret it. I froze. The message sent a chill through me. Was this a threat? Who was behind it, and what did they know? More importantly, what were they willing to do to keep the truth buried? I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. The weight of everything I had uncovered felt heavier than ever. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was no longer just about money. It was about exposing the darkness that had been hiding behind the walls of my family for years. But as I stared at the message, I also realized something else. The person who sent this wasn't trying to protect my father. They were trying to protect something much bigger. The truth was out there, but the question was I ready to face it? I sat in my grandparents' living room, the place now feeling both like home and a prison. The house, filled with their memories, had once been a sanctuary for me. But now, as I stared at the empty spaces in front of me, I realized that everything was changing. The weight of my decision, of standing up to my family, felt unbearable at times. Every day seemed to pull me deeper into a vortex of guilt and confusion. My family had never made it easy for me. And now, with the inheritance, they thought they had a claim to everything. The pressure had been relentless, but nothing could prepare me for what was about to come. The doorbell rang just as I was about to pour myself another cup of coffee. I already knew who it was. Richard and Diane were back, and this time, it felt different. There was no more pretending. This wasn't about family unity anymore, it was about control. I opened the door, and there they were, standing just outside, their faces hard as stone. Richard's jaw clenched in a way I hadn't seen before. Diane's expression was the same, a mix of anger and disappointment. But this time, something in me hardened. I wasn't going to back down. You still don't get it, do you? Richard's voice was low, dangerous. You think this money's just yours to keep? That's not how this works, Allie. You can't just take it and run away. I stood my ground, the door still open between us. I'm not running anywhere, Dad. But I am done being controlled. His eyes flashed with anger. This is a mistake, Allie. You'll regret it. You've always been a disappointment, but this will ruin everything for us. For you. There was a moment of silence, heavy, thick with the unspoken words that hung between us. Then, as if on cue, Jason stepped up beside Richard. I hadn't seen him in days. His usual indifference was gone. He looked serious, too serious. Look, Allie, Jason began, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. I get that you're upset, but we're all family here. You don't have to make things harder than they need to be. I frowned, confused by his sudden appearance. What's going on, Jason? What's your angle in this? He sighed and glanced at our parents before turning back to me. I'm just trying to fix things. There's no reason we all can't move on and pretend none of this ever happened. If you give up the inheritance, we'll keep it quiet. No one needs to know the details. No one needs to be hurt. My heart sank. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. Jason, my own brother, was siding with them. I wanted to scream, to demand why he was doing this, but his next words hit harder than anything Richard or Diane had said. If you don't do this, he continued, his voice a little more forceful now, the family will turn against you, and you won't be able to come back from it. You'll destroy everything. It was a threat, thinly veiled under a guise of concern. I felt my stomach churn with the weight of what he was saying. My brother, the one person who should have been on my side, had chosen to stand with the very people who had broken me down over the years. I felt utterly betrayed. I clenched my fists at my sides, my pulse racing. I had to make a choice, but it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my identity, my freedom, and my right to finally stand up to the family that had never supported me. No, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and resolution. I won't back down. I won't be your scapegoat anymore. I'm not giving you anything. If you want to turn your back on me, then do it, but you won't use me like this again. Richard's face turned red and he took a step closer, as though to intimidate me. But I didn't flinch. I was done with their games. Fine. Richard spat, his voice bitter. But don't say I didn't warn you. You'll be sorry when this comes back to haunt you. Jason just stood there, silent. He didn't even try to argue. The disappointment in his eyes was palpable, but it wasn't enough to make me change my mind. After a moment of tense silence, I closed the door in their faces. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew it had to be done. I wasn't going to live under their control anymore. I was ready to take the next step, even if it meant losing everything. Later that evening, I sat in my grandparents' old study, my hands shaking as I flipped through their documents. Every piece of paper seemed to tell a different story, each one more damning than the last. But one particular folder caught my eye. It was hidden deep within a drawer, as though someone had intentionally placed it there for safekeeping. Inside were more documents, all pointing to Richard's illegal activities. I sat back in my chair, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. My father had been embezzling money from the family business, using my inheritance as a cover for his crimes. The weight of this new knowledge crushed me. How had I missed this? How had they managed to hide it from me for so long? The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The discovery was too much to process. What was I supposed to do now? Exposing him would destroy everything, the family, the business, the legacy, but staying silent would make me complicit. I stared at the documents, my mind spinning. What would happen if I exposed the truth? The consequences would be catastrophic. But if I kept quiet, the lies would continue, and I would forever be a part of their corruption. I heard a faint ping from my phone, and my heart skipped a beat. Another anonymous message. The message read, "Stay away from the truth. If you expose him, you'll ruin everything, your life, your reputation." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was behind these messages? And why were they so desperate to keep me from knowing the truth? As I sat there staring at the phone screen, I realized something. This was bigger than just my inheritance. This was about exposing a darkness that had been festering for years, and no matter the cost, I couldn't let it go any longer. But as I stood up, ready to confront the family, I knew one thing for sure. The battle was just beginning. I sat on the edge of the couch in my grandparents' living room, the silence around me almost suffocating. The walls, once a comforting reminder of their love and wisdom, now felt cold and empty. I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the right decision. The inheritance, the family drama, the lies, everything felt like a weight I couldn't carry much longer. I had come so far, but I was still uncertain. What was I really fighting for? Was it the money? Or was it something deeper? Something that had been buried beneath years of manipulation and guilt. I thought back to my parents' last visit, their faces twisted with anger, their voices laced with threats. They had made it clear that if I didn't back down, I would lose everything, not just the money, but my family, my reputation, my place in the world. They would leave me with nothing but the bitter taste of their betrayal. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized I had already lost everything. I had lost them long ago, and all this time, I had been pretending otherwise. As I sat there lost in my thoughts, the phone rang. I hesitated before picking it up, not knowing what to expect. Is this Allie? The voice was unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar. It was calm, calculated, and I could sense an urgency behind it. I'm an old family friend, the voice continued. I know what your father has been doing. I can help, but you have to take action. Now. My heart skipped a beat. My mind raced, trying to piece together the implications. Someone new. Someone who knew everything. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm someone who can help you expose your father's crimes, but it's going to take everything you've got. The family will come after you, Allie. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves. If you don't act now, they'll continue to manipulate you, and you'll never be free. I felt my chest tighten as the weight of the situation hit me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about stopping the corruption that had festered for far too long. I'm listening, I said, trying to steady my breath. They're not going to make it easy, the voice warned. They'll threaten you, they'll try to ruin you, but you have to stand your ground, Allie. This is the only way to break free from their control. I sat back, taking in what I had just heard. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone tighter. This was it. The decision I had been putting off for so long, staring me in the face. Could I really do it? Could I expose my own father, tear my family apart, all for the sake of truth? I had no choice. I had to do it. For me. For my grandparents. The conversation ended, and I sat there in stunned silence, processing everything. The friend had given me the courage to take action, but it was still up to me to follow through. The fear inside me was undeniable, but it was no match for the burning need for justice that had taken root in my heart. The next day, I received another visit. This time, it was Jason and Diane. They had come to plead with me, but their intentions were clear. They wanted me to give in. They wanted me to surrender the inheritance and go back to being the person they had always wanted me to be: docile, obedient, and willing to accept the lies. Please, Allie, Diane said, her voice soft but urgent. You don't want to tear this family apart. Think about what you're doing. The reputation, the business, it'll all fall apart if you don't stop this. Jason, standing behind her, shot me a look that made my stomach turn. He wasn't interested in fixing anything. He was only interested in what the inheritance could do for him. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. Jason wasn't on my side. He never had been. I'm not backing down, I said, my voice firm, even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream. You're making a huge mistake, Allie, Jason added, his tone dismissive. We all have our roles to play, and you're only making it harder for everyone. The words stung, but I pushed them away. It didn't matter anymore. I had already made up my mind. Just as they tried to convince me to back off, my phone buzzed with a new message. I glanced at it quickly. Another anonymous tip. This one was worse than anything I had ever seen. The document attached outlined illegal transactions linked directly to my father's company. It was damning, and it painted a picture of just how deep his involvement in criminal activity went. I couldn't ignore this. The weight of the evidence in my hands made the decision even harder, but I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let my father or anyone in this family continue to live in their web of lies. The truth had to come out, no matter what. After Jason and Diane left, I sat alone in my grandparents' living room, staring at the evidence in front of me. I felt sick, but there was no turning back now. I had made my choice. I picked up my phone and called the lawyer. I'm ready to move forward, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. I want to expose everything. I'm suing my father, and I'm going public with it. The lawyer's voice was steady, but I could hear the surprise in his tone. Are you sure about this, Allie? Once you do this, there's no going back. I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. I'm sure. That night, I began drafting the legal papers. It was time to expose the truth, no matter the cost. As I sat at the desk, the weight of what I was about to do began to sink in. I knew it would destroy my family, but it would also set me free. This was the only way to take control of my life. The next morning, I was ready. I sent the documents to my lawyer and prepared for the battle ahead, but before I could even breathe, the phone rang again. It was Richard. "Don't do this, Allie," he pleaded, his voice full of desperation. "Please, you don't understand what you're doing. You'll ruin everything. Your life, your reputation, everything will be destroyed." I swallowed hard, steadying myself before I responded. "You made your choices, Richard. And now, so have I." He paused for a moment, then spoke, his voice low and cold. "If you go through with this, Allie, you'll regret it. We will ruin you." I hung up, my hands shaking as I dropped the phone on the desk. There was no turning back now. The phone went silent, and so did my hesitation. The battle had begun. I knew this moment was coming. It had been building for weeks, each step, each phone call, each confrontation leading me to this point. I was standing at the edge of everything I had ever known, and now I had to make a choice, one that would change my life forever. My phone buzzed, and it was no surprise when I saw Richard's name on the screen. I had been expecting this call. It was his last attempt to sway me, to make me doubt myself. "Don't do this, Allie," he began, his voice low and full of false concern. "You're making a huge mistake. This will destroy the family. You'll be the one to blame for everything falling apart." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't the first time he had used guilt to manipulate me, but this time, I wasn't going to let it work. "I've been through enough," I finally said. "You and Mom, you've never seen me for who I am. I'm not backing down anymore." Richard's tone turned darker. "If you go through with this, Allie, it'll end badly. You'll regret it, I promise you." I wanted to hang up, but I didn't. I wanted him to hear my resolve, hear how different I was now. "I don't regret anything," I said firmly. "I'm doing what's right." His silence on the other end of the line was deafening. But before he could say anything else, I hung up. The decision was made. I couldn't turn back. Not now, not after everything that had happened. The following morning, I called a family meeting. I had arranged it at the family estate, the one place that had been my prison for so long. It was luxurious, cold, and everything I didn't want to be a part of anymore. As I walked through the familiar halls, I could feel the walls closing in around me. Jason was the first to arrive. He gave me that look, the one he always gave when he didn't get his way. Diane followed shortly after, wearing the same passive expression that had been her mask for years. Finally, Richard entered the room. His posture was perfect, his face expressionless, but I could see the anger in his eyes. I knew they had all come here expecting me to fold, to back down, but I wasn't that person anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "I have proof. Proof of everything. Of what you've done." I pulled out the documents, the ones that detailed my father's illegal activities, the financial crimes that had been hidden from everyone, even me. I laid them on the table in front of them, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. Jason tried to deflect, as I knew he would. "This is all a misunderstanding, Allie," he said, avoiding eye contact. "You don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't concern you. Don't try to lie your way out of this, Jason." I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "You've always been part of this, and now you're going to own up to it." Diane, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "I knew," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I knew about it all, but I stayed quiet because I was scared. I thought it would blow over, that we could move past it." She looked at Richard, guilt in her eyes. "But I see now that it's too late." I was shocked. The woman who had always been so passive, so ready to side with my father, was finally admitting her complicity. It made everything feel more real, more final. They were all in this together, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to protect their empire. "You're all so quick to blame me," I said, the anger rising in my chest. "But you've been using me for my entire life, and now you're trying to use me again, but it's over, I'm done." Richard's face turned crimson with rage. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you? You're ruining everything. This is about more than money, Allie. It's about the family legacy. The legacy? I laughed bitterly. You're talking about a legacy built on lies and corruption. I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. Richard stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think you've won? You think exposing me will make everything right? This isn't over, Allie. You don't know what you're messing with. Just as I thought I might lose the battle, the doorbell rang. My lawyer. He had arrived with something even more damning, a confession from a whistleblower in the family business, corroborating all the evidence I had presented. It was the final blow. Richard's empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Richard faltered. The calm, collected facade he had so carefully built began to crack. You don't know what you're doing, he spat, his voice now trembling with fear. You'll destroy everything, yourself included. But I wasn't afraid. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dad. You've hurt enough people. It ends now. The family room was silent for a moment as I looked at each of them. Jason, Diane, Richard. They were broken, but they didn't want to admit it. They had pushed me too far, and now they would have to face the consequences. Just when I thought the fight was over, Richard's final words cut through the tension like a knife. You think this is it? You'll regret this, Allie. I'll make sure of it. You're nothing without me. The threat hung in the air, but it didn't faze me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped out of the door, I realized one thing. The battle had only just begun. The night after my confrontation with my family, I found myself standing outside the family estate, staring at the mansion I once called home. The heavy door closed behind me, and yet the weight of my decisions hadn't quite lifted. I had done it. I'd exposed the truth. But as I walked away, a nagging feeling clung to me something wasn't over. I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. The truth wasn't a quick fix. It didn't feel like justice had been served yet. There was a stillness in the air, but it was the kind of stillness right before a storm, heavy, suffocating, as if something much bigger was brewing just out of sight. As I walked further from the mansion, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Another anonymous message. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against. There's more. The message chilled me to the bone, sending a shiver through my spine. What more could there possibly be? I had already uncovered so many secrets about my father's illegal dealings, the years of manipulation and control he had exercised over us all. But this felt different. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It wasn't just about my family's betrayal. This was something far bigger, something that could destroy them all, including me. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Every instinct told me to dig deeper, to find the truth, no matter what it cost. My grandparents' legacy, my legacy was on the line. But the fear, the anxiety, it was a struggle to keep moving forward. How much more could I take? I thought back to the old days, to the times when my grandparents used to tell me stories about their struggles, how they stood up for what was right even when it seemed impossible. They were my foundation, the ones who always believed in me when no one else did. And now, I had to carry that belief. I had to finish what they started. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was my lawyer. Allie, I've got something for you. Meet me at my office. It's important. I took a deep breath, pocketed the phone, and walked toward the direction of my future. There was no turning back now. The next day, in the dimly lit office of my lawyer, I sat across from him, the weight of the entire family's deceit still pressing down on me. He slid a folder across the table, papers, documents, and photographs of my father, deep in the heart of his criminal activities. My father had hidden everything. The truth had been buried beneath layers of lies. And now, I was digging it all up. We've got it, my lawyer said, flipping through the papers. This is the smoking gun, Allie. The missing will. The one that alters everything your grandparents never wanted your father to have control. They knew what he was capable of, and they wrote that will to make sure you were protected. I blinked, trying to process the information. The will? It was all here, hidden in plain sight. My grandparents had known. They had set me up for this moment, even though I had no idea. It was the final piece of the puzzle. This was more than a fight for justice. Now it was a fight for my future. Are you ready to go public? My lawyer asked. This will expose everything. The media, the public, your father, they won't go down quietly. I've already come this far. I said, my voice steady. I'm not backing down now. With a plan in place, I knew there was no turning back. I felt the adrenaline rushing through me as I took the first real step toward ending this once and for all. My grandparents' legacy, my future, depended on it. The day of the press conference arrived, and as I stood in front of the cameras, I could feel the eyes of the world on me. Every ounce of doubt I had was replaced with a quiet confidence. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The truth would finally come out. I'd been hiding behind the fear of what would happen if I exposed my family, but now I was standing tall, ready to take back what was mine. As the press began firing questions, I started to speak. I revealed everything: my father's illegal dealings, the corruption that had poisoned our family for decades. The documents, the recordings, everything was in front of them, irrefutable. But then, just as I anticipated, they tried to stop me. Richard and Jason showed up, their faces painted with rage and desperation. They tried to act as though they were the victims here, trying to control the narrative. Diane was there too, her face filled with guilt, trying to apologize, trying to convince me to back down. But I wasn't having it. I'm done listening to you, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You've manipulated me, controlled me for years, and now it's over. I'm done being your pawn. Jason stepped forward, attempting to deflect. You don't understand. This isn't just about money. You're ruining everything. You've always cared about the money. I shot back. That's all you've ever cared about. Diane tried to interject, but I cut her off. Don't apologize. You made your choice, and you've lived with it. I won't let you manipulate me anymore. With the evidence laid out before them, and the truth finally revealed, the room was thick with tension. The world knew what they had done. My family was exposed, and there was no turning back. But as the cameras clicked, as the reporters swarmed, Richard's last words hit me like a physical blow. You think this is the end, Allie? You have no idea what you've just unleashed. I walked away, my heart pounding, feeling both victorious and hollow. I had exposed the truth, but I knew this wasn't over. They weren't done with me. After the conference, I was walking away from the mansion, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. But then Richard's last attempt came. He called me, promising everything I had ever wanted. The family legacy, the wealth, power, all of it. I'll make it right, Allie, he said, his voice smooth, manipulative as ever. You don't need to go through with this. We can fix everything. I'll change. I didn't hesitate. I don't believe you. I'll make you regret this. You'll never be able to trust anyone again. You'll lose everything, he threatened, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. I hung up, but as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family was far from finished with me. The aftermath of the storm was quieter than I expected. The media frenzy had died down, but the silence left behind was suffocating, as if the world was holding its breath. I sat in my small apartment, staring at the empty space around me, and I realized how much had changed. The weight of my actions, the fallout from exposing my family's crimes, still loomed over me. But it was a different kind of weight now. It was as if I had been through the fire, and though I was scorched, I had come out the other side. I wasn't the same person who had stepped into that courthouse, scared, unsure, and broken. But now, as I reflected on everything, the inheritance, the betrayals, the manipulation, I knew the battle wasn't just about exposing my family's dark secrets. It was about reclaiming my life. I was no longer fighting just for money or revenge. No, this was about my personal freedom. The life my grandparents had envisioned for me was slowly coming back into focus, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. But just as the tension started to ease, my phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. I had thought I'd seen the last of these, but the message was simple, its tone urgent. There's more. You need to find out. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone, the words echoing in my mind. There's more. What could there possibly be left to discover? My family had already been exposed. They'd been caught, and the world knew their secrets. What more could there be? I didn't know why, but the message sent a chill down my spine. It was as if someone was telling me, urging me, that the truth still hadn't been fully revealed, and for some reason, that truth, whatever it was, felt like it could destroy everything. A few days later, I met with my lawyer to go over some final details regarding the public fallout. The press conference had done its job. The family was reeling, their reputations in tatters. But as we were going over the paperwork, my lawyer slid another document across the table. It was an old family will, one that hadn't been brought to light until now. "This," he said, pointing at the paper, "changes everything. Your grandparents deliberately altered the inheritance to keep your father out of control. It was never meant to go." To him, they knew exactly who he was. My heart pounded in my chest. This was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just that my father had been corrupt, it was that my grandparents had fought against him, fought for my future, even after they were gone. The will was hidden to protect me, to protect my legacy. And yet, my father, my own flesh and blood, had manipulated everything for his own gain. The sense of betrayal hit harder than before. It wasn't just my inheritance at stake, it was the very legacy my grandparents had left for me, something they had hoped I'd carry forward with honor. I looked at the will again. This was my moment. I wasn't just exposing my family anymore. I was taking control of the future, of my future. And for the first time in years, I knew what I had to do. I told my lawyer, "I'm going public. It's time to finish this." The next day, the press conference was set. I stood before the cameras, ready to reveal the final truth. My father, Richard, and Jason had already made their moves, legal teams, damage control, their pleas for forgiveness, but this was bigger than any of that. It was about holding them accountable, making sure they couldn't continue to manipulate and destroy. As I started speaking, revealing the hidden will and the full extent of my father's financial crimes, I could see the panic in their eyes. Richard tried to deflect, tried to argue, but his words faltered in the face of the truth. Jason, ever the opportunist, tried to twist the narrative, accusing me of trying to destroy everything out of spite. But I wasn't having it. Not anymore. I looked directly at Diane. "You knew," I said. "You stayed silent. You let this happen. You were complicit." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw real remorse. But it was too late. The damage was done. And then Richard, the man I had once called father, tried to make a last-ditch attempt to regain control. He offered me money, his apology, everything I had ever wanted, in exchange for my silence. I didn't hesitate. "No deal, Dad," I said, my voice steady, my eyes unwavering. "You've lost everything, not just the money, but any chance you had of being a father." The weight of that moment hit me like a physical blow, but I stood tall. My heart pounded, but I wasn't scared anymore. After the press conference, I thought it was over. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could begin to rebuild my life. But the next day, Richard called me again. He tried to use my grandparents' legacy against me, promising that everything would go back to the way it was if I just walked away. "Please, Allie," he begged, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't know what you're doing. We can fix this. I'll make things right. I'll change." I took a deep breath, my hand tight around the phone. "I don't believe you anymore. I'll make you regret this. You'll lose everything. Your name, your legacy, everything. It will be over." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. He was right. It would be over. But for the first time in my life, I knew I could handle it. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't the victim anymore. As I stepped away from the phone, from the family that had betrayed me for so long, I realized something. It wasn't over. Not completely. But it was the end of the beginning. I had won, not because I had exposed their secrets, but because I had reclaimed my life. The road ahead would be hard, there would be more battles to face, but I was ready for them. As the last of the family's skeletons were revealed to the world, I finally felt a sense of peace. I had won, at least that's what I told myself. Now, it was time to rebuild.